So this is the paper that I'm happy to present that we published in May 2025. It is the product of a longer process between Eva and me discussing our different experiences, me coming from research and policy analysis, Eva coming from journalism and research, and having quite different perspectives on these issues. And when we met, we decided that it would be a great idea to do something together on this issue, which seems a bit forgotten, or at least not as present as the issue of families of women and children also remaining in the camps in northeastern Syria. So this is the product of these discussions, of Eva's fieldwork that she will be speaking later on, and of my work around the issues for a couple of years now for a counter-extremism project. So, of course, it's important to set the stage, and that's why I will, first of all, speak a bit about the departures from Germany to Syria and Iraq, which happened in the context of the rise of Islamic State at the time. And that really led to an unprecedented mobilization of around 40,000 foreigners. And only from Western Europe, more than 5,000 to 6,000 travelers departed. And the German group, the German contingent, was among the biggest. It's the second largest after the French and before the Britons. Since 2011, that's according to government figures, more than 1,150 individuals departed from Germany to Syria and Iraq. Around a quarter were women and girls. Most of these departures happened between 2013 and 2015, which coincides, of course, with the best time, so to say, of the so-called Islamic State. Until 2013, the Germans usually joined smaller groups, Jund al-Sham, al-Nusra, Majlis Shura al-Mujahideen, and then the smaller groups started to join Islamic State when it gained importance and took territory. And then after the declaration of the Caliphate in 2014, usually Germans would directly join ISIS. We know that around 65% of those travelers from Germany are known to have supported or are still supporting terrorist organizations like ISIS or Al-Qaeda, including in combat. So that's a significant number, but of course we can also assume that the number is probably higher. After the declaration of the Caliphate in summer 2014, as I said, not only men joined Islamic State, but also women and whole families were traveling, following the declaration of Islamic State propaganda, calling for families to join this protest state. And several of the women took also their young children with them to support the state building project. Let's go towards Germans with ISIS, so the roles. We are speaking about ISIS because the majority of those traveling joined ISIS in the end, around 80%, probably also more. And Germans were really completely integrated into ISIS structure. And it's also, in a second factor, important to mention that the whole Islamic State structure really focused on very strictly gendered roles. And that's why we have to kind of differentiate between roles for men and roles for women. For men, usually what happened is that they arrived in Syria and Iraq. They registered with Islamic State, kind of giving basic information and also the motivation how to engage with Islamic State roles. They usually underwent training, combat training, but also ideological training, and then went on to support Islamic State in different capacities, usually as fighters. Some also on suicide missions. Some joined the secret police. Several were also active in propaganda, of course, mostly directed to German speakers. We have several interesting leadership figures among the German cohort, including Sayyam, who became the deputy governor of the ISIS province Aleppo, and then also the education minister, so to say. We have Mohammed Mahmoud, who led the German unit of the Katiba and al-Awlaki. And then also Dennis Cuthbert, which I think also most of you might know under the name of Dazu Dog, was a rapper and became the most important, or one of the most important German-speaking ISIS propagandists. These were briefly the roles of men with ISIS structures. And then regarding the women, usually the objective would be to marry an ISIS fighter. Either you were, as a woman going to Islamic State, already married, or joining your husband in Islamic State territory, or shortly after arriving, the objective would be that you marry an ISIS fighter and then become the mother of the next generation. But within the household, let's say, another task would also be dealing with Yazidi slaves. Several women returnees have been convicted for crimes related to the genocide against the Yazidi community, so that's quite well documented. Several took Sharia and Arabic language courses. The Germans were kind of concentrated around Raqqa, and several of the women took the same courses and also had this kind of community around them. Some women also were very active in producing propaganda that also allowed them to support Islamic State without engaging with men that they did not know, which would be forbidden under Islamic State ideology. And several also were active in fundraising and in motivating others to also join and travel to Islamic State territory. Several women would know how to deal with weapons of war. Some received, for example, Kalashnikovs as wedding gifts. And also some were able to use suicide belts, which were mostly in a defensive matter, but nevertheless used by them. And then you had individual involvement, not of the majority, but individuals were supporting preparation of terrorist attacks. Some were active in combat units or in the secret police. But as far as we know, women would not engage in actively combat roles, at least not what we know from German returnees. Children were prepared for these roles. As I said, they were the next generation of Islamic State members. So boys were, for example, trained at a very young age. First experiences of combat training were used in propaganda as well. And girls also at a very young age were married off to fighters. It's interesting to also stress that more than half of the travelers of the German cohort hold at least the German nationality. 80% had a migration background, and almost all of them were coming from Salafist background and underwent radicalization processes in the Salafist community. The online factor, so to say, was not as important. It was present, but more important was the in-person meetings. We have different profiles, different radicalization processes, so that, as we know, is quite individual, but social exclusion and economic disadvantage do play a role. But then again, some also had academic background. So it's quite complex, but still gives you an idea of who went from Germany to join ISIS. Our paper is focusing on the period after the caliphate, from the years 2019. So that's why we're focusing on the kind of 6 years since then. And so what happened to the Germans who joined ISIS? We have a number of individuals, 270 individuals, including at least 10 women who died. Then you have around 370 men and women with a connection to Germany who disappeared. They could be in Syria, around the Idlib region, for example, in Iraq, Turkey, or also potentially deceased. Quite a number returned. Around 40% of the original travelers returned to Germany, including at least 130 women. And most of those returned voluntarily, quite early on sometimes, quite after a long stay. So that's, I think, important to keep in mind. And then you have the remaining ones, right? In general, it's important to stress that tens of thousands of alleged ISIS affiliates remain in camps and detention facilities in northeastern Syria, among them many foreigners. And we have still a mid-double-digit number of German men, women, and children. It's very complex to get precise numbers, but that's the kind of phrase given by German government most of the times to give you an idea. Let's quickly go into the return, because it kind of stresses already the issue that we want to raise about men and women from Germany. So Germany was quite reluctant, as other European nations, but then also quite productive in repatriating, at least when it comes to minors and their mothers. So there were in total 8 repatriation missions to Germany, often in cooperation with other nations, mostly European countries. And these missions focused on, as I said, children and their mothers. There were some court decisions forcing the German governments to take care of the issue, but there's also the Kurdish side of things that said they would not allow the children to travel without the mothers. To date, the kind of repatriation missions are concluded. According to the government statements, the remaining women do not wish to be repatriated. There is one exception, that is a young adult male who was repatriated as well. It's, to our knowledge, the only men who have been repatriated to Germany from northeastern Syria. His story is that he had been brought to Syria and Iraq by his mother at the age of 11. And so he was repatriated together with his mother in 2020-22, when he was already a young adult male. He has since then been convicted for terrorist membership in Germany, received a prison sentence, but has been already released, had an early release 1 year ago in December 2024. So with Italy and Finland, Germany is the only Western country to have repatriated men at all, because all the other repatriation missions in Western Europe, at least, but also Europe as a large, really focus on repatriating minors and the mothers. And while it's important because minors have to be considered victims in this sense, and according to international law, it should be avoided to separate minors from their mothers for their primary caretakers. Still, it's a clear division between men and boys, or young adult males, and then women and children on the other side, mainly around framing them as a security risk, and only as a security risk. So let's look at the topic of our paper. So the men with the connection to Germany or German nationality who remain, well, again, here, difficult to get concrete numbers. According to our knowledge, there are 40 adult men with the connection to Germany in a system of detention facilities in northeastern Syria. Eva will talk about that later on from her own experience. And there are at least 28 German nationals, so individuals who hold the German nationality, sometimes also another. More than 11 hold a second nationality, and they are aged between 19 and 62 years. These are information provided by the German government. Several of these individuals were or are married to German women and have German children. So even in the case of those who do not hold German nationality, there is a strong connection to Germany in many cases, either because they have been socialized in Germany, or have a connection to German nationals like German women and German children. There have been 2 confirmed deaths among the German group in detention. Kadir T. from Hamburg, who reportedly died in summer 2022, and Muhammad A. in August 2022. And this is part of a larger situation that has been confirmed by a 2024 Amnesty International report, that there have been quite a number of deaths in these detention facilities to date. The report is based on testimonies of former detainees who report also mass graves. So there are no figures on criminal investigations specified on the individuals who are detained in Northeastern Syria, but experts estimate that all of these individuals from Germany have criminal investigations pending, and that the majority might also have an arrest warrants, which is significant if we think that if at some point these individuals return to Germany, there is, from a legal perspective, already something waiting for them, especially considering that there are a number of cases where the wives of these individuals have already been convicted. So there's already also information from that side on the cases. One problem, again, Eva will be talking about the situation in the detention facilities later on, but one of the issues with the men is that there is a lack of access to lawyers. And this very concretely means that they have no possibility to demand repatriation before German courts, which is something that some of the women and children have done and successfully done so. The only case where something of a legal procedure happened is the case of LF, who succeeded to have a lawyer represent him in court. And so in late 2021, an administrative court in Berlin argued in summary proceedings that he had no right to be repatriated by the German government, since there was no immediate danger to his life and or physical well-being. That's an interesting first decision. However, that was before the attack on the Alcina detention facility and mass prison break. Eva might speak in more detail about that incident later on. But since then, so since this decision, the situation has clearly deteriorated. So it might be worth to reconsider that case. But for that to be possible, there would need to be access to lawyers to have that case and other cases revisited. So key takeaways from our paper is that we want to stress that the majority of those traveling from Germany have been socialized and radicalized in Germany. So there's a clear connection to Germany, even if they do not hold German nationality. So from that perspective, Germany does hold a responsibility towards those individuals who traveled. Then it's also important to stress that Germans were fully integrated and held important positions within ISIS. So from a legal perspective, it is very crucial to hold them accountable for the crimes that they have committed within ISIS or helped commit. And what we demand, repatriation, is not something naive. It does include risks, and we were very well aware of that. But it's still the best solution, because if not, we have ongoing human rights violations. We have a lack of accountability for crimes committed within ISIS. And also, we have no possibility for any kind of rehabilitation and disengagement, given the situations that they are in. And finally, the security risks are only growing because of this complete lack of control. And finally, there is also the factor that only rule of law responses can aid combating extremist narratives and propaganda exploiting the reluctancy of countries of origin dealing with their nationals. There was supposed to be an introductory remark by Professor Sol. I hope that we can listen to it later on, because he really, had it on spot, that the political inconvenience which this situation clearly represents is no excuse to allow grave human rights violations to continue to fester. That's why we have developed a couple of policy recommendations, especially given that the German embassy in Damascus has reopened in March 2025. I think there is really momentum now to deal with this issue. First of all, we propose that the German government, together with its partners, establish a complete list of the remaining German nationals and/or German-connected persons detained in Northeastern Syria. We do understand that there might be lists, that there might be information on who is still detained, but these lists should be, for example, completed and shared with relevant stakeholders. Then it's also crucial to finally establish communication with all detained German nationals, as well as individuals with a connection to Germany. That includes also access to lawyers and access to humanitarian organizations. Then we propose to establish a list of individuals wishing to repatriate it, similar to what has been done with the women, because that, of course, has to be a step that an individual wishes to be repatriated. And then we propose to kind of have a phased repatriation, so to establish repatriation batches to coordinate detainees' returns. For example, prioritize those with specific vulnerability due to them, for example, being minors or having serious mental health conditions or health conditions, which is more manageable than just bringing back all of them back in one batch, so to say. And then finally, Germany has really established in the past years, excuse me, quite an elaborate system of prosecuting returnees, of rehabilitating returnees, of reintegrating them into society. So there is a lot of capacity there. There are a lot of motivation from those working on countering violent extremism to work with returnees. Many that we have spoken to explicitly are in favor of repatriation, despite all the risks, despite all the knowledge of the serious progress that some of the men have, but still are motivated to work with them. So the final recommendation would be to establish a coordination network and to prepare the affected German federal states for the male detainees' return. That would include also risk assessment and management, prosecution and rehabilitation. And now I'm happy to take a couple of questions, and then I'm looking forward to have Eva's presentation, which kind of concludes what we have covered in our paper. Thank you so much.